The boy who planted a forest. In a small village near a dry mountain, there lived a boy named Ethan. Ethan was only 12 years old. His village had a big problem. There were almost no trees. Many years ago, the mountain behind the village was full of green trees. Birds sang in the morning. The air was cool and fresh. But people slowly cut down the trees to build houses and make fire. Year after year, the forest disappeared. Now the mountain looked empty and brown. When the wind blew, dust filled the air. When the rain came, the water rushed down the mountain and flooded the village. One day, Ethan asked his grandfather, "Grandpa, why is the mountain so empty?" His grandfather sighed and looked at the mountain. "Long ago," he said, "this place was a beautiful forest. Animals lived there. The land was healthy." Ethan looked surprised. "A forest, really?" "Yes," his grandfather said. "But people forgot how important trees are." That night, Ethan could not sleep. He kept thinking about the mountain. What if the forest could come back? He wondered. The next morning, Ethan walked to the empty mountain. The ground was dry and hard. There were small rocks everywhere. It did not look like a place where trees could grow. But Ethan had an idea. He dug a small hole in the ground. Then he planted a tiny seed. After that, he poured some water on it. Ethan smiled. "This will be the first tree," he said. Every day after school, Ethan returned to the mountain. He planted one seed each day. Sometimes he planted 2, sometimes 3. The villagers saw him walking up the mountain with a small bag of seeds. One man laughed. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "I'm planting trees," Ethan answered. The man laughed even louder. "Trees? On that mountain? Nothing will grow there." Another villager said, "You are wasting your time." But Ethan did not stop. Every day he planted more seeds. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Many seeds did not grow. Some seeds were eaten by birds. Some seeds died because the ground was too dry. But a few seeds survived. One morning, Ethan climbed the mountain and saw something amazing. A tiny green leaf was coming out of the soil. The first tree, Ethan shouted happily. He carefully watered it every day. Soon another seed grew, then another. Slowly small green plants appeared across the mountain. Years passed. Ethan grew taller. The tiny plants grew into young trees. Birds began to return. They built nests in the branches. The wind became softer because the trees protected the land. The villagers started to notice the change. One day, a farmer said, "The air feels cooler now." Another villager said, "I saw birds on the mountain this morning." People became curious. They walked up the mountain and saw rows of young trees. "Who planted all these?" they asked. Ethan's grandfather smiled. "My grandson did." The villagers were shocked. Ethan planted all these trees. They suddenly felt ashamed. For many years they had only cut trees, but this boy was bringing the forest back. Soon the villagers began to help. Some people carried water. Some people planted seeds. Children helped protect the young trees. Together they planted hundreds of trees, then thousands. 10 years later, the brown mountain was green again. Tall trees covered the land. Birds sang in the morning. Animals returned to the forest. The air became clean and cool. The floods stopped because the trees held the soil together. People from other villages came to see the beautiful forest. They asked, "Who created this forest?" The villagers pointed to Ethan. Ethan smiled and said, "I only planted the first seeds." His grandfather looked proudly at him. You showed everyone that one small action can change the world." Ethan looked at the forest moving gently in the wind. He remembered the first tiny seed he planted years ago, and he smiled, because sometimes a forest begins with just one small seed. Don't forget that big changes often begin with small actions.